now and in the future. We welcome the use of Welsh language at meetings. I've had no requests for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Members in the chamber, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. Members participating remotely, can you please refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please remember to keep your microphones muted when you're not talking. May I remind members that as per the statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending the meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask you all to please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting. Moving on to the agenda, we may need to pause because we have Ysgol Brynaman joining us this morning, but they've gone to the wrong venue, so they're on their way down rather quickly. So I'll take you up to announcements. If they're not here, then we'll decide what to do then. So agenda item 1 is attendance. Democratic Services will be making a note of members' attendance in the meeting, but should you lose connection, could you possibly leave a comment in the chat bar on your return to ensure that this is picked up? Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. Dominique, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've had apologies from Councillor Jason O'Connell.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies from the floor or from online? Thank you very much, sir.
Chair, Councillor Ron Burnett.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Ron Burnett. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Gareth Harris, Monitoring Officer and Assistant Chief Legal Officer. Do you have any advice for members, please?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. With regard to agenda item number 9, which is the budget and medium-term financial plan, my advice is that you should declare personal interest if you are a member of a community council. Also, 3 community councils have been referred to in the report regarding the county delivery plan, namely Pontypool, Cwmbran and Blaenavon. So those who are members of those councils will also have a personal interest in relation to that report. So if I read your name, could you please confirm that interest? So the members of Pontypool Community Council are Councillor Nick Byrne. Correct. Councillor Linda Clarkson.
Yes.
Councillor John Haller.
Yes.
Councillor Gaynor James.
Yes.
Councillor John James.
Yes.
Councillor Sue Malson.
Yeah.
Councillor Rosemary Matthews. Yes. Councillor Caroline Price. Yes. Councillor Nicholas Simmons.
Yes.
And the members of Cwmbran Community Council are Councillor David Thomas.
Yes, correct.
Councillor Stuart Ashley.
He's not online at the moment.
Okay. Councillor Peter Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Sue Morgan.
Yes.
Members of Hentley's Community Council, Councillor Colette Thomas. And member of the Croeskeilog and Llanrafon Community Council is Councillor David Williams.
Yes.
And Blaenavon Town Council, Councillor Liam Coles. Thank you. With regard to the agenda item 16, the pay policy statement, my advice is that you should declare a personal and prejudicial interest if you have a close personal associate who works for the authority. Please note that the pay policy statement covers the SRS, but it does not include teachers or support staff. So the following have personal and prejudicial interests, and my advice is that you need to, those who have those interests will need to leave the meeting. So can each of you confirm that interest when I read your name? Councillor Janet Jones. Councillor Sue Malson.
Yes.
Councillor Alan Slade.
Correct.
Councillor Jane Watkins.
That's correct.
Councillor Giles Davis.
Correct.
Councillor Joanne Gordon.
Correct.
Councillor Colette Thomas.
Correct.
Councillor Rose Seaborn.
Correct.
regard to that, the deputy presiding member will deal with this item in the absence of the presiding member. I also want to make Council aware of advice to officers. With regard to the pay policy statement, all officers will need to leave the meeting when this item is being discussed. But can I ask Council to agree that Jason Lewis, Corporate Director of Resources, be given permission to stay as he is presenting the report, and also for the Democratic Services officers, namely Dominic Redman and Chris Slade, to stay in order to assist with the operation of the meeting. If I can ask Council to agree that. Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Member. I'm not... thank you, President. I'm not aware of any other interest to declare.
Thank you, Dennis. That takes us to agenda item number 4, confirmation of the Council minutes of the 23rd of January 2024, starting on page 5 of your agenda. Members, could you possibly state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as approved. I don't see any hands raised. I'll take those as approved. Thank you. Agenda item 5 is an update on actions. Members, the updates on what has been done to implement our previous decisions start on page 21 of the agenda. Could you possibly indicate whether you have any questions or comments on the minutes? No. Members, do you agree to note the update on actions? Thank you very much, members. They are noted. Agenda item 6, which is the receipt of petitions. There are no petitions, so we'll move on. Agenda item 7, public question time. There are no public questions, so we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the announcements from the Leader and the Chief Executive. Leader, do you have any announcements, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member, and welcome members to this meeting. First of all, it was a pleasure to attend the work being done on the new 3G pitch at Ysgol Gymraeg Gwynthlu in Trefethin last week. The new pitch is taking shape over the next year at Trefethin, Abersychan and Llantarnam will really transform provision across the borough, so I look forward to attending opening events as soon as possible. It was also a pleasure to be up at Gwynthlu to see the new nursery provision there too, which is again really making a difference in that community and part of the new 3 to 18 ethos of that school as part of the community as much as possible. Secondly, I'd like to say a big thank you to the Crossykilliog School Senedd for coming into Council this month to grill Councillor Clark, Councillor Gordon and myself and to hold their Senedd meeting in this chamber. I was really impressed by the work that they're doing to give a voice to students at their school and also about their diligence and their interest in wider public affairs as well and some of the issues that they're looking into at their school. I've been impressed by students from schools from Llantarnam to Blenavon when I've come into this chamber to hold similar events recently. And I'd just like to remind members they're always welcome to ask if there's a local school that they'd like to have along. My door's always open, and I'm sure other members would say the same. So thank you to the members who've arranged those events, and that's an offer to other members too. It's always great to see the young people of this borough and the interest that they take and the work being done by both students and the staff in our schools. So I know Councillor Clark and myself are more than happy to be as much of a conduit to having those events within the chamber as we can be. Thirdly, I'd like to thank everyone who attended the Food Summit in Blenavon last week, and a special thanks to the organisers of that event. There were over 200 residents, business and community groups who took part, with 3 activities taking place in something that's hoped will become an annual event as part of our food resilience programme. So thank you to everyone who was involved in that event and which took place in the Workmen's Hall in Blenavon. Next, along with Councillor Clark, we welcomed Social Care Minister Julie Morgan to MIST this month to see the excellent work being done by their staff across public services to help young people experiencing difficult times. Their work helps keep children in their local communities with their families, with carers, schools and friends avoiding out-of-county placements wherever possible, which of course, as well as a saving to this authority, is also much better for the young people themselves. It's an excellent example of best practice that makes a real difference and which those staff should be incredibly proud of. So thank you to all of them for the hard work that they do. I know it's often a stressful job that they do, working with young people in difficult times, but they do make a huge difference. So thank you from Councillor Clark and myself to all those staff. Next, I'd like to say a big thank you to Julian, to Andrea and the staff and volunteers at Torvine Play Service for an inspiring event at their volunteer awards last week. The service they provide and the difference it makes to the lives of young people is hugely valuable, and I know from the turnout of councillors across all groups how much we value the work that the Torvine Play Service does. I think it's sometimes something we take for granted in Torvine, as if that kind of play service exists everywhere. We know it doesn't, and we know that's because of the work of the people who run the service and the model of service that they've created, really concentrating on community provision and using volunteers in a way that's both cost-effective, but also, I think more importantly, provides a great experience for young people. The way that they work with young people with additional needs and disabilities to make sure they get the chance to play, to make sure their parents get a chance for respite, and that they're involved and an equal part of any play scheme really is inspiring. And also the stories that we heard last week of the people who used to work at the play scheme as sort of play scheme alumni, if you like, both in the summer play schemes and across the term time, who've gone on to work in education, in health and social care. We heard from someone working at a Premier League football club, or former Premier League football club, I should say, no offence to Southampton, who've talked about the experience that they gained working in the play service and volunteering in the play service. The story of the young people who volunteer is not only a great thing for the people who they help provide provision for, but also for their own futures too. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to everyone at the play service for everything that they do and they continue to do. Also to our community councils who partner with us to help provide those provisions. I know colleagues from community councils were there too, because that really is a team effort across Torvine to keep that service going. I've been on here yet. Okay. That's the end of my announcements then. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you. We were hoping that Ysgol Brynholm would have arrived by this time, but they're not here. Can I bring Councillor Stuart Ashley in to declare an interest, Ella, please?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Yes, Councillor Ashley is at the meeting. It's in relation to the agenda item 9, the budget and the county plan delivery report. As Councillor Ashley is a member of Cwmbran Community Council, Councillor Ashley, you will have a personal interest to declare. Can I ask you to please confirm that interest? Thank you.
I declare that. Sorry about my late arrival. I was detained otherwhere. Yes, I declare that.
Thank you.
I'm a member of Cwmbran Community Council. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Chief Executive, do you have any announcements to make, please?
Just one announcement from myself, Madam Presiding Member. Members may be interested and pleased to know that the leader and I met with Chief Officers of the Police, Mike Richards, and he's agreed to come into future council meetings in order to give us an update on what's going on across the borough and also to take members' questions. So at the beginning of future council meetings, every second council meeting, Mike will be in attendance, as I say, to answer your questions and to give us that update. So I just thought I'd let members know that.
Thank you for that, Chief Executive. Nigel, do you want to continue with your report, or do you want to make a break?
I think we'll have to go. I think we'll have to go on. Okay. But we can have, if I finish my introduction, then we can have the break, or if the executive member's done hers before we go into the debate, depending on when they arrive.
Thank you, Nigel. That takes us to agenda item 9, then the budget and medium-term financial plan, starting on page 23. Nigel Aurelius, Deputy Chief Executive, could you deliver this report for us, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member, and I'm sure most members would prefer to see primary school children singing than listening to me, but hey-ho, it's me you've got at the moment. This time last year, the backdrop to the budget was very much the significant inflation, particularly with regards to energy, that we were seeing, and the cost of living crisis. So our approach to that budget therefore reflected those unusual circumstances, and we used reserves to cushion the impact. A couple of years where our funding from the Welsh Government has increased significantly had allowed us to set solid budgets, keep the ask in terms of council tax at low levels, and therefore improve our financial resilience. Clearly, whilst helpful, those increases could not on their own reverse the significant impact we experienced as a result of the years of austerity in public funding. This is my 18th, and it will be my last budget that I present to Council as your Finance Director. Through that time, we've seen the financial crisis of 2008, the years of austerity that followed, the COVID pandemic, and then rampant inflation. Local government is a resilient sector, and we have navigated those difficult times and tried to maintain and improve services against a backdrop of the rising cost of and demand for services. The budget for 24-25 has seen a return to very difficult funding settlements and an outlook that is as challenging as we have seen. A need to continue to focus on what really matters, and maintaining our financial discipline is as important now as it has ever been. Before we turn to the detail of the 24-25 budget, it's worth saying a few words about the current financial year. Our in-year monitoring position is positive, and we are looking at an underspend at the year end. As a percentage of the overall budget, it is relatively small, but it will allow us to strengthen our reserves, which again will be helpful going forward, especially as members know our reserve levels have always been modest. The decisions taken as part of previous budgets to fully fund pay inflation are a key contributor to that positive position. The budget the Council will set today is only one part of the complex financial picture of a local authority. The current year and the outlook for the medium term are all part of that complex picture. To focus on one in isolation is not a sound approach. I've always got 2, 3, sometimes even 4 years in my head at any one time. As mentioned earlier, we use significant reserves as part of the 23-24 budget. As members will know, I have always advised against the use of significant levels of reserves to fund recurring expenditure. It was right to do so for the current year because of the exceptional circumstances, but it was very important that that was not repeated in 24-25 and that the budget did not have a significant reliance on reserves. Rather, we needed to make the appropriate decisions and not simply kick the can down the road. The budget for 24-25 has done that. Turning now to the budget for 24-25, clearly any budget and medium-term financial plan contains a range of assumptions that are often difficult to determine, and a lot comes down to informed judgment. With all the uncertainty around currently, be that in respect of the funding outlook or inflation, both pay and generally, exercising that judgment is more difficult. The papers before you are based largely upon the provisional settlement, as the final settlement will not be received until later today, and the actual budget debate in the Senate will be in early March. That said, where we have been made aware of potential changes, we have reflected those in the proposals before you, and I am not expecting any material and detrimental changes. So I'll briefly introduce the budget, its construct and conclusion, together with some commentary as your Finance Director on our overall financial standing and financial prospects going forward. In your Council papers, you have, starting on page 23, the covering report on the budget. I think this is the first Budget Council agenda where my papers are not the most voluminous on the agenda, so I'm quite pleased about that. This includes the statutory recommendations, and I'll come back to those. You then have the budget book, which is as an appendix, which itself has 5 annexes: the budget mitigations, the trail from 23-24, the detailed budget, the updated medium-term financial plan, and a glossary of terms. There are then 6 more appendices, which include property bandings and council tax by band, the outcome of the equality impact assessment, the environment policy, the capital strategy and prudential indicators, and a summary of the public consultation. I'll come back to the covering report and the formal recommendations, but I'm now going to briefly go through the budget book and annexes, starting on page 33. Section 3 of that report once again takes members through the story of the budget. This is a budget that started almost as soon as the budget for the current year was set. Paragraphs 3.1 to 3.7 take you through the initial gap, the provisional settlement, which for Torvine is 3.24, further pressures that emerged during the budget process, and the mitigations, a full list of which is within Annex 1. Whilst the Welsh Government have honoured the forward indication of an all-Wales uplift of 3.1% and local government has received relative protection, there is no doubt this is a difficult settlement which in no way covers the pressures that this authority will face going forward, whether that is pay, inflation or demand. Paragraph 3.8 then outlines the expected changes that will form part of the final settlement. Of particular note is the expected inclusion of the consequentials arising from an uplift in funding to Welsh Government that Welsh Government have decided to pass on in full to local government, which is very welcome. Members will see that this extra resource has been used to supplement the pay and other precious contingencies that may arise. In recent budgets, members have agreed to retain some funds in anticipation that pay awards may exceed what has been estimated. That approach has served the Council well in recent budget rounds. Paragraph 3.9 then outlines the final budget. Paragraph 3.7 talks about the impact around the fire levy in respect of pensions, and I'll come back to that later in terms of risks. 3.11 outlines the scrutiny consideration, and finally paragraph 3.12 details what this budget actually contains, which includes the increase in council tax, the fact that mitigations contain minimal service implications, and the uplift to the school community. And I'm sure all members will have seen commentary from other authorities in the build-up to this budget process. The next part of the report outlines our medium-term financial plan, in summary with fuller detail and within the appendix. This year we have no forward indications from the Welsh Government for future years, and there is considerable uncertainty around public sector funding going forward. Whilst I do understand how difficult it is in these uncertain times, the lack of any forward indication is slightly disappointing. I have no option as your Finance Director but to produce a medium-term financial plan for the Council. The risk with no forward indication that there is a rush to worst case planning and all the difficult choices that will entail. It does not help planning if we merely just assume the worst. Our medium-term financial plan is based upon a cash uplift in Welsh Government funding of just 1%, which is a reduction on the current medium-term financial plan. The other assumptions made are articulated, and we believe them to be prudent and realistic assumptions. And the MTFP has a financial challenge of circa 35.2 million to be addressed over 4 years, with a challenge of 14 million in the first year. There is in place a strategic programme, it's called Project Apollo, aimed at taking cost out in a thematic and cross-cutting way, and that served us well for the 24-25 budget and avoided a salami slicing / percentage reduction approach. This programme will continue to look to address the medium-term plan and will again commence serious consideration once this budget is approved. It actually has already started in reality. The themes for 25-26 onwards are going to be review of early intervention and prevention and the support provided by external grant funding in achieving the required reduction in demand, place-based grants and the employment arrangements supporting those, demand management, functional redesign, reviews of services across the Council, fleet functional redesign review, a review of buildings and sites used to deliver services, fees and charges, schools, exploring the delivery of services using shared delivery models, exploring digital shift opportunities and reviewing existing and exploring new partnerships. The next section of the report then goes into our reserves and reserves policy. We have never enjoyed high levels of reserves as an authority, and in the past they have come under pressure to address in-year demand and service change. We've always resisted using reserves to any significant level to underpin recurring spend. As I commented earlier, although we've a significant amount of reserves for the current year, this has not been repeated to the same significant degree in the proposals before you today, as outlined in the second paragraph 5.5. Apologies, I seem to have two paragraph 5.5s. Paragraph 5.4 and the first 5.5 detail the actual reserve levels, and paragraph 5.3 reminds members of the operational level and the authorised level for the general fund, which we introduced this year. If monitoring allows at the end of the year, we will take the opportunity to improve our financial standing as appropriate and mitigate the risks. You've then, in the next section, got the capital position and programme. And then Section 7 details some risks which we all need to be mindful of. In respect of the risks, they're all important for members to reflect on, but I just want to draw members' attention to the risk outlined at 7.1G, where we've assumed that the increased cost of teachers and firefighters' pensions will be fully funded by the UK Government, which will then be consequently passed on by the Welsh Government. This has been the case in the past, and I've got no reason to believe it won't be the case for these increases. But until the funding is confirmed, it is something we need to continue to be aware of. Of course, the budget assumptions around pay, especially in the current climate, always present a risk that we need to be aware of and manage. So now returning to the covering report, starting on page 23, in 3.2, I detail my professional responsibility in terms of reporting on the adequacy of the budget, adequacy of reserves and contingency plans, and this report and the papers discharge that. Paragraph 4 then takes members through the council tax information based upon an increase for Torfaen of 4.95%. Our band D will now stand at £1,550.57. Council tax itself only funds 16% of our budget, but the yield is still significant at over 50 million. Paragraphs 4.4 to 4.7 show the impact of precepts, both in respect of the community councils and the police. The next section of the report covers the outcome of the equality impact assessments on our proposed mitigations and our public consultation, and that is followed by the environment policy and the capital strategy and prudential indicators. In respect of the latter, this has already been considered by the Governance and Audit Committee. The formal recommendations, which start on page 29, are in 4 parts: to approve the budget, the statutory recommendations in relation to the budget requirement of council tax, updates in relation to supporting plans, and the capital strategy and prudential indicators. And as is always the case when the budget is concluding, I want to put on record some thanks. Firstly, to Dave Lilly and Dave Weaver. They've become known as the Daves. Without whose support and professionalism, we wouldn't have a budget to consider. It is also Dave Lilly's last budget, hence why he's chosen to wear the same jumper as me today. And we've worked very closely on all 18 budgets. Although he is much too modest to say so, he has personally contributed so much to the financial stability, standards and financial performance of this council. And I'm pretty sure everyone in this chamber recognises that. To their colleagues in financial services, and particularly the LFOs, lead finance officers, another real challenge this year, and our financial services division have been at the forefront in ensuring we meet those challenges. Deb Smith and Revs and Ben staffs, subject to members agreeing the budget today, it's now over to them to send out the bills, and these will be the last bills to go out to 40,000 households with my name on. So I'm looking forward to receiving the 25-26 one, and obviously then administer the benefits that support our most vulnerable. My colleagues, strategic directors and their teams for their support in once again developing this budget. I always say this, but their support is and always very much appreciated. Collective responsibility and discipline remains a real strength of this organisation, and I believe it will get us through whatever the future holds. That collective approach is precious, has to be worked at, and I suspect is not evident in every organisation. And then finally, Tom Roberts and his colleagues in respect of the overview and scrutiny of the budget and the democratic process. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Nigel. I'd like to hand over to Councillor Sue Morgan, the Exec Member, before we go to questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Thank you, Nigel. Conventions are useful things, but there are times when the need to focus on the big picture demands a slight departure from them. So I'm going to start where I'd normally finish, by putting on record my personal thanks to all who have supported the process that leads us to today's report on the 24-25 budget and medium-term financial plan. We've all witnessed the well-managed, calm, competent and supremely collegiate approach that Nigel and the Daves have honed to a fine art. They bring together the expertise of our Resources Directorate and the leaders and managers across this organisation, and they do it with openness, constructive dialogue, And here I'd just like to add that we're grateful to those who took the time to respond to our budget consultation from our communities. And, of course, just the right degree of prudence. That approach inspires members' confidence, I believe, across the Council, and it helps us support the effective scrutiny and management of our finances. And there again, I'd like to put on record my thanks to the Cross-Cutting Scrutiny Committee and its chair. Nigel and Dave are presenting their final budget today. I'll wipe a tear from my eye at this point, but thankfully we will benefit from their skills and knowledge for some time yet. But while we do the impossible and try to find worthy successors, I know I can speak on behalf of everyone here, and I thank them for all that they've brought to the borough and the legacy of strong and effective resource management that they will leave behind. Thank you. So turning to our revenue budget position for 2024-25, I want to start by highlighting what this budget is able to achieve. Despite a macroeconomic situation that has good local authorities across Wales and the UK staring down the barrel of cuts in services, Welsh Government has delivered the expected uplift to our settlement, and for that we are grateful. But as we all know, the tidal wave of post-COVID demand for our vital services has swamped that uplift, and it makes it harder and harder to keep our services running. We, like all councils, are caught between the rock and the hard place. On the one hand, the need to go on being there for our most vulnerable residents, for our children's life chances and for our communities. On the other hand, knowing that every increased demand on a family's budget is a blow to those who are struggling to make ends meet. And we know our communities. Councillors and officers across Torfaen interact daily with these people who are doing their best for their families, despite a Tory-induced financial crisis that has hit those who have the least the hardest. And no amount of fire sale tax giveaways, should they materialise, will ever be able to repair that damage. And so it's with relief, in Torfaen at least, that I'm able to present a report to Council that outlines an affordable budget with minimal service implications. It makes sensible provisions for future pay awards and provides a like-for-like funding uplift to the Council's school community of 3.18 million. It even allows for some development of services such as the running costs of an expanded Crown Bridge Special School, continuation of the School Leaver Employment Scheme and one-off reserve funding to ensure delivery of the transformation of our much-loved farm. Crucially, our most vulnerable children and adults, those who need the most intensive support, are protected from the worst of the funding pressures, though we would always want to do more. And we're able to manage energy and fuel inflation impacts on crucial services to our communities. And all this is being delivered with what looks like it will be among the very lowest level of council tax increase in Wales, and for the third year running, that is the case. Continued funding of our approved council tax reduction scheme will also ensure that we can alleviate that pressure for many families. And thanks to good in-year management, we're able to buffer against those future pressures with modest but prudent levels of reserves. That said, the medium-term financial picture still presents a very challenging outlook, with 35.2 million to be addressed, as the Deputy Chief Exec has already outlined, over the 4 years from April. We're not immune to the pressures facing the whole of the UK, and austerity has already pared away much of our room to manoeuvre. And even with the prospect of a UK government that finally understands the importance of public services at local level, and we're all pinning our hopes on that prospect, I believe, there is a tough road ahead. But as the preparation of our budget for 25-26 is already underway, and Project Apollo, led by our Chief Executive, continues to drive efforts for greater efficiency and effectiveness, I think we're making a great start. The leader of our council continues to play an important role in shaping funding relationships and policies across Wales, and that's a really important asset for us here in Torfaen. I have the greatest confidence that members of the council will continue to make measured and informed decisions in relation to our use of resource as we put these recommendations and consider those put before us. Thank you, Madam Presiding Member.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. And I will open this up for debate. Any questions? Councillor David Thomas, you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Nigel, there's no question from me again. I just wanted to take the opportunity to praise you and the Daves on an excellent and well thought out budget. I'd like to think perhaps the budget has got better over the years because of possibly the fear of questioning from Councillor Slade and I. But I'd just like to say thank you very much for all the work that you and the Daves have done.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Any other comment on the budget report? Dave Williams, Councillor Dave Williams, Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Member, and I'd echo some of the comments of the great work that Nigel and all the team have done. I'm sure that probably a few people, as well as myself, kept in mind his point that he was looking 3 or 4 budgets ahead and will be trying to extract that from him before he goes. But a couple of points, if I may, going through the budget. First, obviously, at 3.1, it was helpful to note that the social care workforce development grant had come through, and obviously that's taken off a mitigation issue that we had some concerns about that were brought forward to the Council. It's also very pleasing to see that the input and comments from the cross-cutting scrutiny were taken on board, particularly around the pay provision, and noting that 4 further grants have transferred to the 24-25 budget settlement, which presumably will give TCBC a bit of a greater control of that sort of funding rather than a dependency on coming back from Welsh Government. It's helpful to see the council tax increase as a figure as well as a percentage, so I commend that, because obviously the Band D increase of an extra £1.41 a week is less than a cup of coffee or half a pint of beer, depending on your language. So, you know, I think that makes it real for people. It's helpful that we've continued to have the council tax reduction scheme. I presume this is based on good data, and I just suggest it may be helpful to know what proportion of households this is in terms of Torfaen. I would estimate, what, a 10th or a 12th, so that may be of benefit as well. We see the challenge going forward that you've outlined at 3.4 over the next 4 years, and I would note also at 5.3 it's been helpful to see the corporate proposals brought together, which, if you like, puts the flesh on the bones of actually the collective work that you referred to, Nigel. I would commend also at 5.5 the figures and the detail on public engagement around the budget. It was slightly perhaps disappointing that 943 visits to the site but only 91 responses, but I think that perhaps reflects that maybe there was good information and that there weren't so many queries. And it's certainly a lot better than 17 in 2022. So I would commend the council continuing to engage in this process to get sort of feedback. And I thank the officers for including those details in Appendix 7, and I would suggest that there's an opportunity there for us to review those and see if there are constructive elements that we feel we could address in any way. At page 51, it's a very helpful graphic on the overall TCBC funding. So a suggestion might be that if that is actually available on the website, it makes information more transparent for people to see. What was my other point here? Oh yes, and at page 84, I think it does make sense to, in the light of the budget pressures and things that we've faced, to look at this review of fees and charges, conscious this is something that social care and housing do each year. So given that, you know, perhaps some of those haven't been considered for a while, I think that is an area that we do need to look at. On page 95, the Appendix 3, noting the council tax increases on Band D properties, which does make sense and I presume is a statutory requirement, but obviously we have far more properties in Band B and C, so I think it's helpful to show that information as well in the interests of transparency and information. And finally, just a note at page 106 on Appendix 6, the capital spend is obviously showing quite considerably in 24-25, significantly reducing in 26-27. So it's a question as to how realistic this is and you know, whether we perhaps need to be making some further provision in our reserves and considerations. But overall, I would commend the work that's been done, and I have no hesitation in voting for this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to endorse all the wishes to Nigel and his team for presentation of this budget. As an authority, we're really facing difficult economic future and uncertainty, but for Nigel and his team, the work that he's done on presenting this budget, I thank you. Thank you all and wish you well in your retirement.
Thank you, Councillor Janet Jones. Councillor Stuart Ashley.
David's outlined a fair few things that I was about to say, but never mind. As chair of the cross-cutting committee, I'd like to say thank you for both scrutinies that we've done on it. And I think it's a measure of the amount of work you put into this, Nigel and David's and team, that we've got the budget we've got. And I'd like to thank Sue as well as the executive member, because we are making a lot of sense of what's happening, and it's not going to be good going ahead, but at least we get a good picture. I'd also take into view Nigel's thing about not using reserves, because I remember that the first time I sat down. I remember it now, and hopefully we can get back to a view of looking at this. I think we've discussed it where we look at it in a different way. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, as been said. Hope you enjoy your retirement and don't have to come and look at another one of these, except as someone outside, because you've done this awful long time. I remember this. I will say thank you to the Scrutiny Committee, because we do give it a good going over, and people like David and the rest of the committee and Rose are giving it a good going over. And it is very difficult to find with officers like we've got. They're there before us, which is how it should be.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley.
Yeah.
Councillor Giles Davis.
Thank you. I just want to say good luck, Dave and Nigel, with your retirement, and thank you for all your work over the last, I've been at the council now coming up to 12 years, so I know it's been a difficult time, and just thank you for all that. I just wondered as well, did I miss you when you was doing your talk at the beginning, that reserves was used to keep the council tax low for last year? If that was correct, how many times has this been done over the last couple of years? Also as well, I was just taken aback by the comment the exec member said about it was an affordable budget. Perhaps in our world as councillors, it is an affordable budget because we are on allowances and most of us are working. But for people actually out in the wards, it's a real struggle for them. And although this budget is still set low, it's still a rise. No matter how much you dress it up, it's still an increase. And there are people really struggling. We're seeing more and more people using food banks, can't afford to pay the electricity and gas, especially in my ward. So unfortunately, I'll be voting against the budget because I think people's had enough. And, but we shouldn't be putting up the council tax yet again. This seems to be, I've been a councillor now, coming to 12 years, every year. It's increased year on, year out, and we're dressing it up. It's affordable. Yeah, it might be affordable for us, but it's not affordable for Joe Public out there who's really struggling at the moment. And there's some real bad poverty out there. So sorry, I can't be all cheerful about it. I just think it's a shame that we've actually got to raise it again. I can't support it. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giles Davis. Nigel, did you want to come in on whether he was misheard on the first?
Yeah, I won't comment on the council tax. That's a political question that can be answered. No, in relation to the current year's budget, what I said was we used reserves to help us get an affordable budget, i.e. protect us from reducing services. That was the use of reserves in 23-24. It wasn't any relation to council tax. But if we hadn't put the reserves in last year, we would have been making service reductions for what we believed at the time was a spike. I think that's been proved right. And once you cut services, you can't bring them back. So that's why we put the reserves in, to protect services and not to cushion council tax.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Nathan Yowell.
Yes, I'll try to be brief. I'd just like to associate myself with comments that have been made by the majority of members in the Chamber. I think it's very refreshing. It's actually a positive sign that the majority of us can come together and unite behind this budget, because I do think this is probably the best budget we could have put forward in the situation we're in this year. And I think we We have to remember that. There is an issue, and again, looking at the Labour group and other members who are no longer with us, that this budget embodies the manifesto we were elected on in 2022, because we came forward with a programme that we were going to protect and reinforce communities and actually protect those services that we thought and agreed with our communities that were important. So I think we've very much done that. And like I said, there were 30 members elected on that manifesto pledge 2 years ago. The reality is, when it comes to it, if you look at the car crash that is happening in real time in many council chambers in England, and if you're looking at the difficulty that other councils are going through in Wales, I think you do, I think Nigel, Dave, which I can't forget you, but also Councillor Morgan deserve credit for actually steering us through this year. But we have to realise that actually, and this has nothing to do with Nigel and Dave's departure, but I think the next 12 months and from next year onwards, the budgets are going to get much more difficult, and we are going to have to take some very difficult decisions. It's just a plea to all members, wherever they sit and from whichever bit of the borough they live in. I think we're going to have to step up to the plate in the next 12 months to work with officers to go out there and talk to our communities about what those priorities are going forward as we look towards the next 3 or 4 years to get the authority through. But I'd like to say just again to associate myself with the majority of comments that have been made today.
Thank you, Councillor Yowell. Councillor Elizabeth Haynes.
Oh, thank you, Presiding Member. Just a little bit of a different take on some of the comments that have been made, particularly in relation to the breakdown of the council tax increase per week. Putting a bit different spin on it, that it equates to 3 loaves of bread. You know, however much half a pint of beer is, the more important figure or the more important description for me are that equates to 3 loaves of bread a week for some families. We've got multiple food banks and warm spaces throughout this borough, and I am really concerned about the impact of the council tax increase. I appreciate that our council has one of the lowest in Wales proposed increases, and I think that is very much down to the team that we have of officers. So I am still very concerned. 4.95% is a significant, is a week's bread for a family, and that seriously concerns me.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Any other comments? Councillor James?
Yes, I just wanted to just make a statement that I want to thank everybody, all the hard work that they put into this budget. It's absolutely an amazing budget compared to a lot of the other councils in Wales, and just to make a statement that I'm really proud that I'm a councillor for Torfaen Borough Council.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Anthony Huntley, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Presiding Member, and just like to thank members for the way this debate has been conducted. I'd like to start at the obvious point, really, by thanking Sue for her hard work, and also to particularly thank Nigel and Dave Lilly, as well as Dave Weaver, this year for the job that they've done this year and many others. I remember coming into this council in 2012 as quite a young, naive councillor. I was young once. And Nigel and Dave immediately struck me as 2 people who both had a tremendous amount of professional skill and intelligence and experience in what they do, but also that it wasn't just a set of figures on a balance sheet for them. They both care about this borough. They care about the people and the services that we provide, and the advice that they provide, and the expertise with which they've taken through all the budgets that I've been involved in, both as exec member and then deputy leader and leader. Their advice and their support has really been invaluable. And as I say, that advice not just comes from a professional capacity, but also as people who care about the borough and the council, and all the people who work for the council. I look forward to seeing them in the gallery next year as we present the budget. That was a joke. Before Nigel heckles me. Perhaps more likely out on the canal towpath or somewhere enjoying their retirement. They certainly deserve it. And whilst we'll miss them, it's obviously a good thing that people get to enjoy a retirement whilst they're in good health, and whilst people are saying that they didn't think they're old enough to retire, as opposed to saying that they should have retired 5 years ago. That's certainly the case with Dave and Nigel. I've had no end of people ask me how they're able to retire at such a young age, but maybe that's just because they keep themselves fit and well. So I'd just like to thank them for all the work that they've done, because I think the budget sort of really shows the hallmarks of the approach that we try and take as a council. We've been calm and we've been prudent, but prudence, I think, is very different from, as Nigel said, always assuming the worst. And we've tried to take sensible judgments, for example, on energy costs over the last 2 years, which haven't led us down the route of making unnecessary decisions and savaging services. Instead, we've taken an approach, as one of the things that was used, reserves to sort of counter the spike in energy costs, rather than taking revenue funding on a recurring basis off budgets. So I think that calm and prudent approach has been very useful. But of course, it's also an approach that requires a whole year process. We've already started on 25-26. You'll probably be glad to hear that. Sue and myself are probably less glad to hear that, looking through papers in January about 25-26. But that's necessary work, because I think the longer you take over a process like a budget, the more calm and sensible you can be. When you're pressed to a deadline, often you have to make decisions that you otherwise wouldn't want to take because the clock is ticking. The more we can do to sort of try and extend that process and have a whole year process, I think is valuable. The other thing I think works very well is the fact that it's a whole council process in this borough. It's a real team effort. We've talked about Sue and her colleagues in resources, but the contribution that officers make across the council is welcome. We have a system of sort of collective responsibility in the wider sense of the word, and we don't have shroud waving from different departments, arguing with each other, saying that if you don't give me more money, then the world's going to fall in on its axis. We have a situation where departments talk to each other and try and address what is a collective issue of how we bring a balanced budget in, rather than competing with each other. I think that is very welcome, and that's a culture that I know will continue. Secondly, that also applies to members, and I think we've seen it in the debate today. Councillor Williams made very good points about the scrutiny process, and that's something that we've hoped to improve every single year. And thanks to Stuart and colleagues, Councillor Ashley and colleagues, for the contribution that they've made to that process. We try and take their suggestions on board. We try and bring proposals to them before decisions are made, rather than after decisions are made, so they can make a real difference to the budget and how it's produced. I would like to say a few words on council tax. We do recognise the pressure on households. We recognise that we've lived through a cost of living crisis over the past few years that doesn't look like abating, even though inflation has come down slightly. There's a backdrop of inflation sort of peaking at above 10%, I think is a valued one. Not all our services follow inflation. Of course, we've got other demand and cost rises on our services, but we've tried to avoid that being reflected in our council tax rises of 1.9% this year and 4.9% this year. That will mean that there has been a real terms decrease. The council tax rise, again, is below the triple lock level. Pensions is below the average rise in wages. And I'd love to sit here and say that we don't need any rise in council tax at all, but frankly that just isn't realistic, and that would be dishonest of me, sitting in this chair. If you look at councils that have tried to do that, what's happened in subsequent years is they've had to bump their council tax up by double figures, or they've had to put in a Section 114 notice. And we've seen those Section 114 notices, as I'll mention in a minute, in councils that are from far more affluent places than we are. So I think that calm, multi-year outlook on council tax and a responsible approach that balances things properly is what's necessary. So I'm glad that we're not in the position of many councils of having to propose a double-digit council tax rise. Over the last 3 years, if you look at our council tax rise compared to other councils, it's £300 less than some. So that's just an idea of the amount of money that's in people's pockets that wouldn't be if we hadn't taken that prudent approach. But we do have to balance that with protecting services. You can't call for a council tax rise and not say where you would take the money from. If we'd not risen council tax over the course of the last council term, we'd be £25 million per year worse off. Now, where would that £25 million come from? Schools? Social care? Because it has to come from them, because there's no way you can get that scale of savings otherwise. So we would be seeing mass redundancies in our schools, social care just being unsustainable. And that would have real human consequences. So we do have to protect the wish to keep council tax down with that need to protect services. I'm glad that schools have got a rise in this settlement. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy for them. We know the pressures that schools are facing because most of us sitting in this chamber and online are governors. So we know the difficult decisions that schools are having to make. But they would be having to make even more difficult decisions if we'd not taken the approach that we did of helping schools in this budget. The same with social care, the same with valued environmental and community services. I think as well this budget protects the early intervention and preventative spend that's so important. And that's important not just because we're a compassionate council, but also because we're a pragmatic and prudent council. You've seen in other areas, especially across the board in England, where they have taken money away from some of the preventative services, youth services, play services, services that impact on the health and well-being of people. And in the long run, that proves to be a false economy because it just loads more pressure onto acute services, whether that's the health service, whether that's the police, whether it's other agencies. Taking money out of those spends can have a negative consequence in the long run. And we do have to balance council tax with financial sustainability. You only need to look across the border at stories from Northamptonshire to Croydon to Birmingham to look at what happens when that doesn't happen. Stuart makes a very good point about reserves and how prudent use of those is the right thing to do, but that we can't use them for recurring spend, otherwise we quickly get into a position that other councils have seen. Neither can we avoid the difficult decisions that Councillor Yole mentioned. We have to cut our cloth properly, and that's been difficult this year. I know the budget is not as heated as it sometimes is. That doesn't mean we haven't had to take difficult decisions to save nearly £6 million from the running of council services. We will have lost valued colleagues and people who do a great job and who are committed to this borough. Colleagues who are left are having to do more with fewer people. And I'd like to thank our staff at this point because I think the workforce implications of the last 14 years shouldn't go unsaid. Our staff are having to do more with fewer people. There's more pressure on them. There's more demand on them. And their wages have been cut in real terms across local government, across the UK, by around 20% over the last decade and a half. So I recognise things aren't easy for them. And at the end of the day, as employers, as councillors, we have to take their welfare into consideration as well. People sometimes outside think of the council as being the 40 of us, but it's not. It's the collective efforts of the 4,000 staff who run our schools, our social care, our departments within the council, from planning and public health to environmental services and community services as well. It's the collective effort of those people that helps the people of our borough to get by. So I think it's worth repeating that. We won't relent on those difficult decisions. And just lastly, to point to the national picture that Sue alluded to, my role in the WLJ means that I see more from different council budgets across Wales than most. I would like to say Welsh Government do deserve credit for the way that they've approached this budget. They've talked to councils, not at us, and that's not something that happens elsewhere. They respect the difficult decisions that we've had to make. They've done their best, I think, to protect council budgets as much as they can do, but it doesn't mean that it's not a difficult budget for us to set, both in revenue terms and I think in capital terms too. Nigel mentioned section 6 of the report. There is a real pressure coming down the line on our capital budgets. There are demands on those budgets that we all know about, from schools to other services, to our roads, to parks, to everything else, and how we are going to address those whilst also addressing the pressing capital issues that climate change and net zero present to us as well. how are we going to decarbonise our fleet and our estate without the capital funding coming through for that. For the UK Government, I hope they reflect on the debates that are going on in councils across the UK and in other public services as they look to set their budget from next week onwards. There is a real chronic issue facing public services and the continuation of those services. The very fabric of our society that they provide, I think, is under threat. And lastly, the more we can do to lobby whichever government there is for more medium-term forecasts, the more we can do to plan things through. But I would like to commend this budget. It's not an easy budget. It's not an ideal budget. It's a real-world budget. But it is one that I think strikes the right balance between all those priorities.
Thank you, Leader. Before I take members to the vote, the recommendations are on page 29. I'd like to offer a collective thank you. I know some people have spoken, but as presiding member of this council, I'd like to offer a collective thank you to our officers and our staff. And you will be missed. You're still with us for a couple of months, Nigel, but you will still be missed, Dave. Thank you very much. I'll take you to the recommendations then, members. It starts on page 29 of the report. The recommendations are at 8.1. Members, do you agree these recommendations? Show of hands, please. Thank you. Anyone against? 3 against on the screen. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. That report is carried. Thank you, members. That takes us to agenda item 10. Sorry? Oh, the school is here. Right. We'll take a little break and we'll invite Eskil Brynonan to come into the chamber. Thank you very much. Da iawn, Ysgol Brynolman. We waited in anticipation for this singing this morning, and it was absolutely wonderful. So thank you very much for joining us at Council, and happy St David's Day. That was a little light relief after a heavy budget. That was good. That takes us to agenda item 10 now, which is the County Plan 22-27 and the Delivery Plan for 24-25. And this starts on page 141 of your agenda. Stephen Vickers, Chief Executive, could you deliver this report, please?
Thank you, Madam President. I'll deliver it, but nowhere near as well as our wonderful children were singing to us there. But I've got the unenviable task of following them. But this report then seeks Council's approval for the adoption of our third annual delivery plan. Members will be familiar with our commitment to agree and publish annual delivery plans that will take forward the aspirations of the Council as set out within our 5-year county plan. The delivery plan highlights key lines of activity beyond our business as usual that members and residents will see delivered over the year ahead. The rationale for our delivery plan is simple. Not only does it provide clarity to officers regarding the focus of their work in the year ahead, but also through making these published commitments, we aim to make Torfaen Council more open, transparent and accountable to our members and to our wider public. Members have been engaged in the development of this plan through the usual scrutiny processes. The views set out by members at January scrutiny session have therefore been taken into account. I'm joined today by the Council's leadership team, who will be happy to take any questions members may have. And with that, I'll simply hand back to you, Madam Presiding Member.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Any comments on the county plan? Councillor Peter Jones.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. I'm wondering whether I'll try and sing what I'm going to say, but I'll spare you that. The report sets out the draft delivery plan for 24-25 for approval by Council. As Stephen has already set out, since adopting the new county plan in December 2022, we have produced and published an annual delivery plan for each financial year. We will continue to do this throughout the lifespan of the county plan, highlighting the key activities planned for the financial year ahead. Appendix 1 therefore sets out the latest annual delivery plan, describing planned activities that we will use to assess progress during the year ahead. Last year, the publication of the Council's delivery plan in 2023-24 was for the first time approved alongside the 2023-24 budget, more closely aligning our service and financial planning. We have continued to bring our planning processes closer together for 24-25, and as members of the Council will recall, both our draft budget and annual delivery plan were received by scrutiny in January. I think it's essential that when we look at the budget, we also look at what we're delivering, and we're making that link more and more each year. The scrutiny was an extremely useful process in terms of fine-tuning the final product presented to Council here today, particularly in ensuring our delivery plan is clear to all members, staff and residents regarding the Council's commitments as we aim to further strengthen accountability across the Council. The basket of activities, milestone and performance measures described within our 2024-25 delivery plan aims to bring our commitments for improving the well-being of people who live and work in Torfaen using the budget available to us, and I would therefore be very happy to recommend this plan to Council for approval. Finally, before handing back to the Madam Presiding Member, I'd also use this opportunity to reaffirm previous commitments to keep Council informed of progress in the year ahead. Council will continue to receive update reports twice a year, keeping all members appraised of the progress we have made in delivering our priorities. And I'd just like to thank members for all the input they've had during this year to getting this plan into the shape it is. Thank you. I'll hand back to you now, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Stuart Ashley. Councillor Ashley.
Yes, I'd like to thank Stephen Vickers and the executive member but bearing in mind that this was the second part of the annual budget and delivery plan scrutiny that I chaired, and say that members totally agreed with what Peter just said now, it was clear that we needed to bring this, it needed to be transparent, and certainly is, that this was what we were going to deliver. Pardon me, I'm mumbling here. It was clear to members that this was something that was a living document. That's the word I was trying to think. And certainly that was the important part of it in our recommendations. So I'd like to commend it. We look forward to seeing it at council and in seminars as something that can be actively discussed. That's the right thing I was trying to say, because I'm pretty certain that's what scrutiny agreed to. Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Member.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Any other comments? Councillor David Williams, Councillor Alan Slade. David Williams.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. I echo much of what my colleague has said there. I think it does highlight the value of the sort of scrutiny process, and I thank the officers for taking on board the comments to actually provide greater detail around sort of the targets and milestones, which is, after all, how we're going to know whether we're successful or not with taking forward many of these things. What I would draw attention to is at 7.2, I think it would be quite useful to indicate, as well as the range of organisations and groups, etc., engaged with, actually the number of attendees at some of those meetings. I think our colleagues in the budget consultation process have set the bar in terms of actually the numbers, how many people responded, etc. And I would suggest that this is a good opportunity to demonstrate our public engagement and perhaps sort of have some consistency in the Council's approach. So just to commend that. And on page 161, with Wellbeing Objective 5, perhaps building on that, I see that's a real opportunity for the involvement of the Climate Ambassador Group to help monitor progress, and I hope the Council will take that on board, having looked at developing some of this public engagement process, to actually make use of it in full to benefit and take a whole turbine approach that is not just the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Alan Slade.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. On page 148 of the county, well, of the report, basically, of today's agenda, the percentage of young people not in education, employment or training, it gives a figure of 2%. Current figure is 2%. How does that compare to the national figures for Wales and the UK? And are we expecting to see a rise in that number due to the effects of COVID and the lockdowns working their way through the system, basically? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Whilst I don't have the figures in front of me, I know it compares favourably to the figures in Wales, that 2%. I can provide more in-depth information on those figures as well. I mean, I guess in terms of anticipation and whilst we know there will be, there's an ongoing impact from COVID and from disengagement, I would hope that in terms of the direction of travel in the county plan and the focus we're going to have, or we continue to have upon that cohort of children and young people, we can mitigate against any increase there. So, whilst I think it's, I can't give any clear indication as to the impact, that work and that focus, and the team, certainly the youth engagement team, is really focused upon working with colleagues within schools, working with the Torfaen Learning Zone as well, in order to continue to keep a good control on that neat figure.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Vickers, Chief Executive.
Just to build on Jason's response there, Councillor Slade, it is an important question. I just want to link this back to the budget, actually, and the point that Nigel had made previously, which was a focus over the coming medium-term financial period on the review of our early intervention and prevention work and how effective that is, because I think that is the kind of work that will help to mitigate the very risk that you're describing. It's a very real risk, but I think our work is focused in the right area to do our best to absolutely minimise that.
Councillor Lucy Williams.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, and thank you very much for this really detailed report. It's very helpful. Just a small suggestion in the way it's presented. I'm looking just for an example at the wellbeing objective number 5. I wonder if it might be helpful, particularly for the wider group of our residents, to put a kind of RAG rating on. So, for instance, looking at this objective 5, a lot of it is long, ongoing work. And it might well be that objectives, there might be risks to the objectives being met. So if there was a way of presenting it in that way, with a sort of RAG rating, it might give us a better idea of how things are progressing. That was my only comment.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. I mean, bearing in mind this is obviously the delivery plan that was set out within the twice yearly updates that we will provide. We do try to do exactly that you've just described. Sometimes with more success than others. It's fair to say there are some areas of the plan in terms of reporting updates. It's not as easy and transparent to report on progress simply because of the long-term nature of the work or the complexity of the work. But we'll certainly take the views on board and try to ensure that as we report throughout the year on the delivery of this plan, that we'll build that very recommendation into it and improve on that we've already done.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I don't see any other hands up. Oh, Peter, Councillor Peter Jones.
Yeah, just to pick up on the points that David Williams made and referring back to what Stuart Ashley said earlier, this is a living document. We will listen to members as they're making helpful suggestions, and if we can incorporate them, of course we will. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I don't see any other hands or comments, so I'll take you to the recommendations, which are on page 144 of the report at 9.1. Do members agree those recommendations? Thank you. Anyone against those recommendations? No? Any abstentions? That report is carried. Thank you very much. That takes us to agenda item 11, the Torfaen LDP Supplementary Planning Guidance, SPG, and it starts on page 177. We have Rachel Stanfield, Principal Planner, and Richard, can you deliver the report, please? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. The report before you today covers 2 supplementary planning guidance documents, which I will refer to as SPGs, and a review of historic and extant SPGs associated with the adopted local development plan. Supplementary planning guidance documents relate directly to the adopted local development plan and provide detailed guidance as to how specific policies will be applied. Whilst I am delivering this report to you this morning, Adrian Wilcock and Steve Williams are available to answer any more detailed questions you may have. The Biodiversity, Ecosystem Resilience and Development SPG details how the Council will ensure new development maintains and enhances biodiversity and ecosystem resilience by following the stepwise approach at each stage of the development management process. It also provides guidance on how to achieve biodiversity enhancement. The draft SPG has undergone a 6-week public and stakeholder consultation, during which time we received numerous comments as detailed in the report of consultation, which is attached at Appendix 1. The final SPG, which is attached at Appendix 3, is being brought back before you today with a recommendation for adoption, taking account of the comments made, officer responses to them and other changes detailed in the report. Likewise, the Green Infrastructure SPG sets out the Council's approach to the consideration of green infrastructure in relation to new developments. It consists of an overarching green infrastructure section, supplemented by 4 detailed topic-based technical annexes on trees and woodlands within development, open space and recreation, public rights of way within development, and landscape design and assessment. Again, the draft SPG has undergone a 6-week public and stakeholder consultation, during which time we received numerous comments as detailed in the report of consultation attached at Appendix 2. The final SPG, attached at Appendix 4, is being brought back before you today, again with a recommendation for adoption, taking account of the comments made, officer responses to them, and other changes detailed in the report. Thirdly, the report before you sets out a review of the SPGs listed in the adopted local development plan with an assessment of their use and a recommendation as to whether to retain or withdraw them. This exercise will clarify the current set of documents which supplement our adopted land use policies. So now, apologies, but we would like to change the recommendation for the shopfront design guide, and that's on page 189 of the agenda. This SPG states that it was written to aid in the determination of improvement grants and related planning permissions for traditional shopfronts within the Blaenavon and Pontypool commercial renewal areas, and it was also to be used for all commercial properties in local centres throughout the borough, and that's excepting Cwmbran Town Centre, where modern shopfronts are more appropriate. It's noted that the commercial renewal areas are no longer in place, but the traditional shopfront design advice is still valid. Therefore, we are now recommending that Council resolves to rename this SPG the Traditional Shopfront Design Guide, and the wording within be changed to apply to areas or sites where traditional shopfronts would reflect the context of the area. So that's to include Blaenavon and Pontypool, neighbourhood centres such as Abersychan and Old Cwmbran, and local shops, but not including Cwmbran Town Centre. And please note that it would then be republished in a digital format and updated in due course. So finally, please note that an updated version of Planning Policy Wales was published on the 7th of February, and that's edition 12, and references will need to be changed throughout the suite of already adopted SPGs. We're therefore asking for an extension to delegated powers to update Planning Policy Wales references as required. The report recommendations are set out at paragraph 8.1 of the report, and in addition, I've just recommended a change for the Shopfronts Design Guide on page 189. Thank you, Madam Presiding Member.
Thank you, Rachel. Any comments on the report? Councillor Stewart-Ashley?
I must admit, this is one of the most fascinating documents I read, because I did give it a fair good reading. And the bit about where you read some, for instance, I give for instance because somebody's on the planning committee, it's actually a central read, I reckon. I don't know Adrian will comment on this, but a lot of the stuff we do, certainly the stuff you've just commented on, shop fronts and the rest of it is fascinating. And also things of woodlands, because I believe we've got our own wood, we have our own wood policy. How that relates to planning committee, I think is fascinating. You've just answered something that I was curious about, where we need to update our own planning policies. Do we have a chance to upgrade it when it becomes necessary? I think you might have answered that, certainly in relationship to shop fronts. And I was fascinated whether where we've got Pontypool and Blaenavon are obvious because they're heritage sites. Neighbourhood centres and places like Cwmbran where they're not quite as obvious, but you've got Victorian buildings, whether that be something. The other bit I found fascinating, because I'm on the canal body, is how the canal relates. But it's how it all ties into our local development plan and how it ties into our planning policy. How are we going to get that all integrated? Because it's a very big document, and it's got a lot of stuff in there which I think we as members are going to have to be mindful of in future. How is that going to be implemented that we understand it? Because it's a really good document actually in a lot of ways, having read it. Could you come back on that?
Ashley, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashley. So the purpose of supplementary planning guidance is to expand on the adopted policies that we have in the local development plan. So in terms of integration, by default that is already done. We start with the adopted policies and we work down from there to explain how we would implement them and how we would take them forward. So I would hope that that's sufficient answer for your question.
Come in on one, Rachel.
Yep.
Yeah, just another one. When you are asked to agree the replacement local development plan, hopefully in the summer this year, one of the appendices will be the forward programme of supplementary planning guidance that we'd want to produce. I mean, this report already says we're going to update the shop fronts one and include things like security shutters and things like that in a new one.
Good.
So there'll be an opportunity then?
Because I just, one of the things I do notice is that obviously it's obvious when you've got heritage shop fronts in Pontypool and Blaenavon, but there's also period stuff that might be coming up. So not, like the Victorian stuff in Cwmbran. So is that catered for?
Yeah, so the shop front design guide does basically include 3 drawings that show those traditional structures and mentions words like mullions and things like that, and suggests to people how they can do that. So it is covered, yes.
You're precluding the stuff in the town centre, but some of that is reckoned by the 20th Century Society to be quite good examples of its own. I just wondered whether there was scope for doing some of that.
Yeah, so that is a good suggestion, and it's probably what we'll put in scope when we do the new one. This one we're suggesting we do to be supplementary to the replacement plan we're doing. And there are other documents as well that sort of influence Cwmbran Town Centre. It's another policies on conservation, things like that. And we do have a general BW1 policy and adopted plan on just general design. So a lot of that is covered, not as specific as you're suggesting in a supplementary planning guidance at the moment.
I mean, I don't want to prolong this, Chair, but the other one strikes me like that because we have long conversations about it. The canal is a bit similar because some of the structures on the canal are not covered by any form of protection. Will they be getting that as well?
Yeah, so we do have the Canal Conservation Area Assessment, and I believe that is published online. And you've suggested it to us before and be part of that forward work programme. I know you're after a canal conservation area design guide to cover things like that. So obviously you're preempting the list that we will be putting to members this summer.
Thank you, Adrian.
Councillor Giles Davis.
Thank you. There's a big concern with regards to Abersychan with the traditional shop fronts. At the moment, Abersychan is back in the trend with new businesses coming into the ward. I'm a bit concerned about the extra cost it's going to cause on to these businesses coming into the ward. A lot of the shop fronts are already being converted from Victorian to modern building standards in the ward, and I'm just concerned that by enforcing this traditional shop front, that it's going to cause additional costs and end up driving businesses away. So that's my concern.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, that concern is understood. I think it'll be taken account at the timing and when we determine the applications. But this SPG would apply to Abersychan. I see that as a traditional area.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jo Gordon.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I just wanted to add that excuse me, that using the set of supplementary planning guidance, it will give confidence to our developers and our communities so that when they're submitting a planning application, they can be more confident that they're meeting our standards that will protect and enhance our natural environment and mitigate climate change. And there's so much information, isn't there? It's hard to pick out what the SPGs are about. So if I just quickly give 2 nutshell sentences. The first one on biodiversity and ecosystem resilience and development, that's a mouthful, means that biodiversity can be protected and that ecosystems are strengthened. And then the second SPG on green infrastructure, that guidance will lead to well-designed developments that enhance our green features, including sustainable urban drainage and, of course, giving opportunities for outdoor recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Dave Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's noting that we had the draft approval of this back in June 2023. So this is essentially a second part of process, isn't it, in terms of going out to public. What I would suggest is an awful lot of detail, and to some extent I feel duplication, because obviously you've gone through the comments in detail at 4.3 and 4.8, but they're also included in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. So perhaps just a little plea for maybe some consideration of perhaps looking to condense reports, because there's a lot of information there. So if you make that point. Second point is to sort of see that, yes, there are, and again, that's the difficulty sometimes, because there is detail that is of interest, sometimes rather deep within. So it was very good to see, for example, the point at 4.3p, where there is actually now a listing of biosecure native species, and that will obviously help inform not just this council, but developers and others who are looking to sort of doing planting within the borough. So it's just to make those pleas, and also just to note, I think, as at page 189, the level of detail, because I think what's really important has been the consolidation of supplementary planning into one place, which I fully commend. Obviously, you've noted things like the council land and open space strategy, where an SPG couldn't be found, which is very honest, but perhaps raises some questions as to where did it come from, how do we get it, etc. So I think that cleansing work is also very useful and important, but it does make one ask the odd question about what was that about in the first place. So just an observation rather than anything else.
Yes, apologies. I know it's quite honest. We just couldn't find that document. And I think it probably wasn't a supplementary planning guidance, but because when we adopted the plan in 2013, with that statement in that appendix, we basically gave it supplementary planning guidance, sort of a level of material consideration. And this report, and I think as Councillor Gordon said, is really resolving that to say, well, it wasn't really, we couldn't find it. In effect, it's a management plan for the council's open spaces that we said was supplementary planning guidance. It probably wasn't. I mean, I'm not au fait, and I'm sure Andrew Osborne, who would see it, could tell you. I'm sure we've got replacement documents on the council, how the council manages its open space. I know there's one on how we manage trees, for example. So, thank you.
Councillor Stuart Ashley, is that a retained hand, or do you have?
No, I just put it back up again. I'm just following on from what Councillor Williams is saying. It would be useful to have like an executive summary of some of this, because I did read through it, and I do agree with what Councillor Williams said about the lot of detail in there. A summary or executive summary of the bullet points of that, so members of our residents get a handle on this, because as Councillor Gordon said, there's a lot of stuff in there, global climate change, nature emergency, some really, really good stuff, but you have to trawl for it. Maybe the bullet points to go on the website to give an idea of where this is coming from, it would be really useful.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. I don't see any other comments or queries. Do you have any feedback? Yes. Rachel?
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Just to let you know that we do have an executive summary of each SPG, and we will publish that bilingually when we publish the SPGs, if you're minded to adopt.
Thank you for that, Rachel. I'll take now, members, to the recommendations that start on page 193 of the report. That is at 8.1. In addition, the other recommendation of traditional shop fronts. So you're aware of those recommendations? Okay. Those in favour, please. Those against? No. And was that an against, Councillor Davis? Or was there a late hand?
Yeah, abstain.
Abstention, right. Any abstentions? Thank you. That's one abstention. That report is carried. Thank you very much. Takes us to agenda item 12, which is the Strategic Equality Plan 2024-28. And this report starts on page 397 of the agenda. We have Stephen Honeywell, Equalities Partnership and Policy Officer. And could you deliver your report, please?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member, and thank you for including this item today, and good morning, everybody. The Council's Strategic Equality Plan guides the Council's efforts to advance equality, diversity and inclusion, and demonstrates our ongoing commitment to meeting the public sector equality duties, the Equality Act of 2010 and the specific Welsh duties. Our strategic equality plan for 2024 to 2028 is due for publication by the 1st of April, and it is a statutory obligation to set and publish our equality objectives by this date. Our work under the current strategic equality plan over the last 4 years has built our understanding of the issues that disabled people and other protected groups face in Torvine, and I genuinely believe that the actions presented in this new plan for the coming years will have a significant collective impact. You will have noticed that the action plan presented with our quality objectives today is still a draft plan. Most activities are finalised, but we require a few further discussions to enable finalisations of some of the actions under Objective 2. Publication of the Equality and Human Rights Commission's Israel's Pharaoh report in mid-November made our timescales challenging. The report had been expected to be published earlier in the year, and it provided 344 pages of evidence and recommendations for public bodies. We've managed to consider the recommendations for local authorities alongside, of course, all the comments and suggestions from scrutiny and the public consultation that ran for 12 weeks. And we've consequently had many conversations with staff across the council about the best ways to respond. Some issues are complex, and it is, of course, essential that staff are using their time effectively and are completely clear about what they will do and the impact that it will have. Because it's important that we get it right, we intend to progress these discussions over the next couple of months before presenting members with a final action plan. The use of the word final there is a bit of a misnomer, though, as although the objectives are set, there is scope to review and update the action plan during the 4-year period, and I propose notifying members of any updates to the action plan while presenting the annual equality report each year. At an early stage, leadership stressed how the SEP should contain specific and measurable activities that sit within service plans, allowing close monitoring of progress and with clear timelines for completion. This integration into existing performance management processes and alignment with the county plan, which is also a recommendation of the Scrutiny Committee from the session on the objectives on the 6th of December, is both helpful and welcomed. Where appropriate, we will put activities and measures into 2024 to 25 service plans, and when we have finalised any remaining objectives activities, we will build these in as well for appropriate years. If I may, I'll hand over to Councillor Peter Jones now to give an overview of the equality objectives and some of the activity to be undertaken.
Thank you. Councillor Peter.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. I know the strategic equality plan presented to members today demonstrates that Torvine County Borough Council remains committed to the principles of inclusion, fairness, equity of outcomes and social justice. It is important that we strive to ensure that this is demonstrated in our employment practices, the everyday behaviours of everyone represented in this council, and of course in our service delivery. As such, the plan looks both inwards and outwards. I was planning to go through each objective in detail, but I'm not going to do that because you've all had an opportunity to read the plan. It's been through scrutiny, so I'll finish with just a few words about it. The set of equality objectives, and there are 6 of them, provides clear area of focus for our staff teams to address, and the action plan finds the balance between realistic about resources but also aspirational expressive, getting my tongue tied, of our determination to tackle inequality. I appreciate the efforts of officers both in leadership and throughout the service teams for the role they have played in identifying possible improvements to the way that we work and ensuring that the organisation is doing everything it can within the resources available to tackle inequality. As Stephen insinuated, this is an ongoing journey and members will have an opportunity to see the final action plan and will be updated annually on progress via the annual equality report as the legislation dictates. But of course, we're always welcoming of dialogue on any equality issues throughout the year and committed to finding solutions, so please don't hesitate to raise these with us. Members will know that for many years I worked for 2 national disability charities. I won't go into who they are, but a lot of members know who they were. And one of the things that in those roles I had to deal with was the councils across Wales. And my experience of that time was that this council is at the forefront of dealing with equality issues, and I think that this equality plan today demonstrates that. So it's been through detailed scrutiny. We've looked at it a few times. You're going to continue to have a dialogue. It's a living document, as Stephen alluded to. We've got a little bit more work to do on the one objective because of the late arrival of the report from the
the Human Rights Commission for Wales Fair report, which we only received in mid-November. But we've done a huge amount of work on this. We're a committed council, and I recommend that we approve this today. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any comments or questions? Councillor David Williams.
Yeah, doubtless you'll be able to see there's a slight theme here. What I'm saying is I think at point 5.3, you noted obviously, and there was a very good discussion at the cross-cutting scrutiny on the 6th of December, I think it's helpful to draw out what those recommendations are within the report, as was done with the preceding reports, because it shows a consistency, but it also shows the value of scrutiny. It makes it quite clear how the report has responded to the scrutiny process, and it makes it more transparent. So if I could make that suggestion. I think the second thing would be to, and again, I've made this comment a little earlier, making it more transparent in terms of what the public feedback has been and how that has been acted upon. There's mention we've made of wording changes at Objective 1 and Objective 6. So again, I think it just could be a little bit more clear. We had these comments, this is how they've been incorporated, because I think it shows how we're doing that meaningful engagement. And it was very pleasing to note, as you've referred to, Councillor Jones, the high proportion of responders who registered a level of disability. I think it was about 42%, either physical or learning disability or mental health issue. So I think that does mean we are reaching out, and I think that's very positive. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Peter Jones.
I'd just like to thank Councillor Williams for those comments. As we've said, as Stephen has made clear, we will be bringing a final draft of this back to the Council later. And obviously, your comments and any other comments that members wish to make to us, we will take full account of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other further comments from members? Councillor Ashley.
As I made with the previous budget and the council strategic plan, the fact this is a living document, and Councillor Jones and Councillor Williams were at pains to stress this. It's important that this is a living document, that equality issues are living issues, as Councillor Jones said, his previous employment, which I think we knew about. And certainly continual vigilance and monitoring on these issues, which unfortunately are the way of the world at the moment. And the necessity to bring this back all the time. So I'd like to thank Stephen and his department and Councillor Jones for bringing this, and make sure this is something that we've had in front of the cross-cutting committee quite a few times, and it's always been a very valuable scrutiny, and thanks members to participating in this, which is important that we're all aware of this as members, and it's an issue that we get in our surgeries, and you know, people bringing us up. Quality issues, I'm sure, is one of the things that we all deal with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. It is a really important report brought to Council this morning. I don't see any other comments or questions being raised. So I'll ask you members to look at the recommendations that start on page 399 of the report at 8.1. Can I ask if members agree with those recommendations, please? Anyone against the recommendations? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That report is carried. Thank you, Stephen. That takes us to agenda item 13, the 5-year Welsh language strategy, which starts on page 437 of your report. And we have with us this morning Alan Vernon-Jones, our Welsh language and armed forces policy officer. Could you deliver your report, please, Alan?
Can I come in first, please,
Yeah.
Madam Presiding Member?
Excuse me.
Members will probably be getting a bit fed up with my voice this morning, but I'm not only going to say a few words on this one. The Council is required to develop a 5-year Welsh language strategy in accordance with the requirements of the Welsh Language Wales Measure 2011. The aim of the strategy is to identify actions and how we intend to promote Welsh identity, the use of the Welsh language, and ultimately increase the number of Welsh speakers within the borough. contributing to Welsh Government's long-term strategy, Cymraeg 2050, a million Welsh speakers. This will be the second strategy we have written as a council since the introduction of the Welsh language standards in 2016. Although the council is responsible for writing the strategy, it is very much a collaborative document for all the partners listed within the strategy to contribute to its success. The strategy has 5 areas of focus. Number 1, legislation and policy. 2, education. 3, the community. 4, services. And 5, the workplace. I will ask Alan now to talk us through the strategy and the targets within it. But before I do so, Alan, I'd like to thank you for all the work you've done on this. Thank you. Alan?
Thank you, Alan.
Bore da, good morning to you. I think it's still good morning. Thank you, Councillor Jones, and thank you, Presiding Member. The report starts on page 437 of your report packs. The Welsh Language Strategy, sometimes referred to as the Welsh Language Promotion Strategy, is a statutory requirement under the Welsh Language Standards, Standards 145 and 146, and must contain a target in terms of the percentage of speakers in Torfaen for increasing or maintaining the number of Welsh speakers in the area by the end of the 5-year period. Now, you will have seen in the report that we are proposing increasing it from the current 8.2% of our speakers in Torfaen currently to 17% in 2029. It must also contain a statement setting out how we intend to reach that target and review and evaluate the strategy and publish a revised version on our website within 5 years of the end of this strategy. This strategy, 2024-29, builds on what we are already doing and combines some of the targets contained within the Welsh Education Strategic Plan, the WESP, and Welsh Government's Welsh Language Strategy, Cymraeg 2050, as Councillor Jones has just mentioned. Our last strategy, 2017-2022, came to an end some 2 years ago now, but due to the release of specific census statistics by the ONS, mainly the ward data, the publication of the existing strategy has been delayed. A similar problem will occur at the end of this new strategy, as the census data will not have been collected or published in 2029. Therefore, we will have to rely on the National Survey for Wales, not as accurate as the census data, to determine the extent we have reached the targets within the strategy. This is a collaborative document, as Councillor Jones has mentioned, which has been consulted with Welsh medium partners within Torfaen, Mentoriaeth, Urdd, Mudiad Meithrin, RAG, and so on, and who form part of the Welsh Language Forum in Torfaen, chaired by Mentoriaeth. Page 15 to 24 of the strategy, 465 or 475 of the budget pack, contains specific objectives and measures in 5 key areas. Legislation and policy, ensuring that each decision made by the Council is assessed in line with the standards and that a conscientious effort to identify the effects on the language are carried out from the very beginning of the process, not when it's presented to you here, that it's done at the consultation process. Education, the decline in numbers over the past 10 years, the census data from 2011-21, has been attributed to the 3 to 16 age group, working with all groups to raise the profile of the language and the importance of the skill, especially when working within public sector organisations. We'll also look at community, provide opportunities for Welsh speakers to use their Welsh, and ensure that existing opportunities are identified using the Cymraeg Welsh, the Work Welsh logo, which I have here. We will also promote cultural activities throughout Torfaen. We'll then look at services, ensure that Welsh medium services are advertised across all partner organisations, and ensure we have a workforce that is able to deliver those services. Closely linked to that is the workforce, and identify where the our Welsh language skills lie, and an audit of those skills, and ensure that we offer training that is specific to the workforce and deliver the Welsh language services. We will report annually on the strategy within our Welsh language monitoring report, published every June, and note our progress against these targets. We will update the base data within the report before it's published online. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alan. Are there any questions? Anthony, Leader?
Thanks, President Member, and thanks, Alan and Peter, for your work on this. I think it's really valuable work, and I know it's something you've worked at for a long time, so thank you. I guess my questions were around the successes of education. I note the points made about Ysgol Gymraeg Gwynthlu being 3 to 19 and trying to bring more sort of community links in with the school, the Maithrin, for example, and working with the feeder primaries as well. I guess the question is, the issue we've always had difficulty with is when children leave Welsh medium education and go back to families where necessarily there aren't great Welsh skills in the households, how we give them an opportunity to continue to use Welsh in their lives. I welcome page 452. The staff figures show a dramatic improvement in the situation from 0.51% of staff with Welsh language skills to 14%, 251 staff, and just maybe something about how that's been achieved.
Yeah, a good point about, first of all, the children leaving Welsh medium education and how we support, giving them the opportunities to use Welsh outside of the school. Those leaving school, to go into the world of work, obviously we will have to, we need to embed in them that their Welsh language skill is a skill, is a ticket, if you like, to better themselves, to have more opportunities within public sector. In terms of parents helping their children, we need to work with parents to support with mentoriaeth and direct those parents to where they can get help with homework, etc. And there are many resources out there that can do that. But it's working with that sector. So, but in terms of improving language skills of staff, obviously we the dedication of this council to promoting Welsh language training, albeit part of the standards, we have gone far beyond that and helped our staff to learn Welsh. We also support mentoriaeth with their community groups that happen across the borough for them to practice their Welsh on a casual basis.
Thank you, Alan. I noticed on the application forms, something that came up in scrutiny actually, was the question of do you speak Welsh or are you Welsh speaking? It's now gone to something that was proposed at scrutiny, the level of Welsh that you're at. And that was a lot easier. Are you at level 1? Because lots of people don't wish to say that they can speak Welsh if they're not fluent. But what level you're at is a good question on our application forms, which I noticed has been taken up, so that's good. So, Councillor Dave Williams.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. I think just a couple of points, if I may, Alan. At 6.1, you've mentioned sort of consultation. It's, I think, helpful to include there who's been consulted. I think it's back in the depth of the report somewhere, but in the same vein as I've mentioned on various other reports, because I think it just gives us an indication of how rounded that is and what organisations exist to provide that support alongside the council within the borough. And then at 10.2, my question was who actually evaluates the Welsh language strategy. You've mentioned it is evaluated, but I wasn't sure who. And I suppose my final point was on page 460, which seems to be suggesting we saw a significant fall in numbers of pupils in Welsh medium education, which does appear to be on the upturn, but just again, if there's any comment on that, and if that was perhaps affected by COVID, for example, as as I think has been referred to earlier on.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Right, okay. In terms of consultation, obviously it's been to consultation with the partners that will help us deliver this strategy. As we've said, that this is purely a collaborative, even though we have to write the strategy is to be delivered by all partners within the forum. So, yes, certainly I'll take that forward in terms of noting who's that. It's also had sight from the leadership team of the council as well. In terms of the numbers dropping, I think I've taken that from the census data of 2011-2021, where that age group, 3 to 16, the significant drop in the number of Welsh speakers, despite us, promoting Welsh medium education and also increasing numbers available within Welsh medium education, that number has dropped. Now, that's not significant just to Torfaen, that is across Wales. There are only 2 authorities in Wales that have increased the number of Welsh speakers over the last 10 years, based on the 2021 census, obviously. So, yes, we're not alone there, but we will continue to promote the language wherever we can.
Sorry, it was just also my point about who evaluates the Welsh language strategy.
Apologies. Yes, the strategy is obviously has sight from the Welsh Language Commissioner, obviously when they're looking into how we achieve the standards, so because of standard 145 and 146, but also the annual monitoring report is submitted to the Welsh Language Commissioner and published on our website on an annual basis, and this strategy will be evaluated within that report.
Thank you.
Councillor Elizabeth Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. On page 5 of the strategic impact assessment, it says that a failure to approve and implement the strategy will mean we will not be complying with the Welsh Language Wales measure 2011, which we have a legal duty. I guess my question is there a risk of any fine or financial implication if we do not hit our own set target within the strategy that we are agreeing today?
There isn't a fine for not reaching the target. However, if we don't publish the strategy itself, we will be breaking the Welsh language standards and hence the Welsh Language Wales measure. But in moving forward, that we have to treat the Welsh language no less favourably than the English language, which is key to that measure from government really. So yes, there are fines attached to the standards. There's a process that we can appeal, etc., through it, but ultimately there is a £5,000 fine for every standard that we break. Now, Torfaen has 170 standards that it must comply with within our compliance notice, which is part of the Welsh Language Wales measure.
Thank you. I don't see any other comments or questions. That will take you. Sorry. Oh, Dave Williams. Councillor.
All it was, Chair, was to sort of say, well, I think it was very positive to have the school coming in and demonstrating the Welsh language skills. So I commend that as obviously a demonstration of the active work that's being done.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. The recommendations start on page 439 of the report at agenda item 12. Members, do you agree with the recommendations? Thank you. Any members against the recommendations? Any abstentions? That report is carried. Thank you very much, Alan. That takes us to agenda item 14, which is the proposed changes to appendices 9, the scheme of delegation, and 12, third-party speaking rights of the Council's constitution. This report starts on page 475 of the agenda. We have Richard Lewis here this morning, Head of Planning and Development. And could you deliver your report, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Good afternoon, members. The Council's constitution sets out the scheme of delegation which allows Planning Committee and senior officers to make certain planning decisions on behalf of the Council. This is mainly in relation to planning applications. The scheme of delegation is set out in Appendix 9 of the Constitution. Appendix 12 of the Constitution sets out the process for public speaking rights at the Planning Committee. And again, that's mainly in relation to planning applications. The Planning Committee has already approved the changes to these appendices in the Constitution, and the changes have already been implemented. The changes are set out in the report before you. The purpose of the report is to inform members of the changes and to request that members agree the updates and revisions to Appendices 9 and 12 of the Constitution accordingly. Finally, if I can ask members to note one correction in the report. In paragraph 4.7, the third line down should read COVID, not COVIC. And then the recommendations are set out in paragraphs 8.1 to 8.3 of the report. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Richard. Any comments or questions on this report? No, I don't see any. So that's take you to the recommendations with the typo that has been pointed out in 4.7. The recommendations are 8.1, 8.2 and 8.3 of the report. Members, do you agree with the recommendations? Anyone against? Any abstentions? That report is carried. Thank you, Richard. That takes us to agenda item 15, which is the changes to the Constitution. Head of Procurement Delegation Level CSO3, CSO5, CSO10 on page 489 of the agenda. Peter Williams, Head of Internal Audit. Could you deliver this report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Morning all. Afternoon all. Quite a short report in terms of proposed minor changes to the delegation levels to the Head of Procurement. They're outlined in paragraphs 4.1 and 4.2 of the report. Basically, we've entered into a partnership arrangement now with three other councils, Cardiff Council, Vale of Glamorgan and Monmouth, to deliver our procurement function. And one of the objectives there is to harmonise, where appropriate, contract standing orders and working procedures to make it easier and efficient for the four partners. This is probably a first of a number of reports you'll receive over the coming period, and is basically our contract standing orders refer to the Head of Procurement, and I'm suggesting we add in that, as it outlines in paragraph 5.2, or their delegated representative. And paragraph 5.3 then sets out some limits which are in accordance with the Cardiff limits, so we have in consistency across the partnership to agree certain requirements that are required when we consult with the Head of Procurement. So basically I'm proposing that we change our CSOs to fall in line with Cardiff's delegation limits for efficiency and ease of operation. Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Member.
Thank you very much, Peter. I don't think there's any need for debate on this. This is just a straightforward report. Are members in agreement with the report? Thank you. Any abstentions? Any disagreement? Thank you very much. That report is carried. Can I invite members and officers with a declaration of interest now to leave the chamber, and I invite Councillor Stuart Ashley, the Deputy Presiding Member, to chair this agenda item for me. Thank you.
Are you going out? Can you hear me okay? Hello? Yes, you are. Everybody out now?
Okay, Chair, the members and officers have left.
Well, good afternoon. It's my opportunity once a year to do this. Right, okay. Agenda item number 16, pay policy statement, page 491. Jason Lewis, Director, Corporate Services. Could you deliver the report, please?
If it's all right with you, Chair, I have a couple of introductory remarks before I pass to Jason.
Okay, thank you, sir. If you, yes, obviously, I forgot.
Thank you,
I didn't have that. I didn't.
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you there.
As members will know, by the 31st of March each year, we're required to approve and publish a pay policy statement. The statement sets out decision-making arrangements for pay, including the role of council, the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales. It describes the relationship between senior and median or average pay. There are no significant amendments to the policy members approved last year. However, I should like to again point out that this council sets pay relationships well within the recommended ranges. Our focus is on ensuring lower paid staff are protected in difficult times while preserving appropriate grade distinctions. I'm pleased to note that ratios in relation to senior and average pay stand at 4.59 to 1 for our Chief Executive and 2.86 to 1 for senior officers. I'd also like to highlight how we've been able to increase the pay of the 900 lowest paid staff and therefore recommend this pay policy statement to Council for approval. Jason.
Thanks, Councillor Morgan. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Member. As Councillor Morgan has indicated, there are no significant changes to the statement. It's pretty similar to the one that was presented to you last year and in previous years, to be truthful, although there's the only other changes really are that there have been changes to the scope of the responsibilities of the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales, which has been altered by an amendment to legislation, and it's largely the same, as I say, as the ones presented and approved by Council last year. The main point that I would draw your attention to, as usual, is the ongoing commitment within this statement to align our lowest pay rate with that of the recommended by the Living Wage Foundation. So that's moving our lowest pay rate to £12 per hour, and that compares to the national living wage, which is set by central government at £11.44 per hour. I'd also like to draw your attention to Section 8 of the statement, which describes the relationship between the Chief Executive and Chief Officer pay and our median pay rate. As a bit of context, the Hutton Fair Pay Review, which encouraged pay transparency and informed the Localism Act, recommended that top pay in the public sector should not be more than 20 times that of the lowest paid. I'm pleased again this year to report that Torfaen ratios remain amongst the lowest in Wales, largely as a result of the pay restraint adopted by the Council. The rate of pay for our Chief Executive is one of the lowest in Wales, if not the lowest in Wales, and is equivalent to that paid to chief officers in some larger authorities. So, thank you. I'd like to recommend this pay policy statement to you.
Right, thank you there, Jason. Anybody have any questions for Jason or Sue? Anybody online?
The Leader would like to comment, Chair.
Leader?
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Yeah, just three statistics to draw out there. The Chief Exec's to average pay ratio, again, down at 4.59 to 1, which is well below the 8 to 12 ratio. That's standard across public services. The Chief Officer to average is also down to 2.86, and you'll note the number of Chief Officers is also down, which shows that we are trying to cut our cloth at a senior level according to the pressures that are on our general budgets. So just three things that have been mentioned that I'd like to draw out of that report and commend it to colleagues.
No questions in the chamber, Chair?
No questions in the chamber. Oh, sorry, Leader, finished. Okay, so if there's no questions in the chamber, no questions are online here, then the recommendations start at page 493 of the report. I'd like to ask members if they agree with the report. Anybody against? And anybody abstain? What's the result there? I can't see, obviously, what's happening elsewhere. Is everybody for, by the sound of it?
That's correct, Chair, yes.
Thank you very much. So invite Councillor Seaborn to return as chair. That's me over for this year.
Will do, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, everybody. So they all troop back in now. Brilliant. Are you there, Councillor Seaborn?
Thank you, Councillor Ashley.
And over, mortal line, and over to you, Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you. Welcome back, members. We're on agenda item 17 now, which is motions on notice. Councillor Anthony Hunt, can you move and explain your motion for us, please? This starts on page 517 of the agenda, members.
Pleased to move this motion. Won't speak at length on it, but I think it's an important one for us to debate the council today. The motion is that we resolve that this council expresses its support for the workers and their families in Port Talbot and beyond who've been affected by the recent decision by Tata Steel. We note the huge impact not only on those directly employed, but also on those employed in the supply chain and in related manufacturing operations across South Wales, including Lamworm Steelworks, where many local residents have worked. We stand side by side with all impacted to support the joint trade union plan to provide an alternative, more positive future for steelmaking at Port Talbot and urge Tata Steel and the Welsh and UK governments to work together to fully explore these alternatives. We recognise the need for decarbonisation, but question the environmental logic of ceasing virgin steel production in the UK and instead importing it from other nations. We also question the national security implications of lacking domestic capacity, in an increasingly uncertain world. We recognise the cost of subsidising production, but also note the social economic cost of the loss of good quality jobs on such a scale. We therefore express our support to the Port Talbot workers and their trade unions in their campaign to secure a more positive future. This is a call for the best deal for workers, the best deal for families and the best deal for a wider economy, not just the cheapest deal. And it notes the impact of this decision, not just in Port Talbot, but in many manufacturing businesses across Wales and beyond. And I formally move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Is there a seconder for this motion?
Yeah, I'll second that.
I'll second it. Thank you very much. Members, do you wish to debate this? Any questions, or do we want to go straight to the vote? I can't see any questions. Shall we go straight to the vote then? Ask members if they're in favour of this motion. All those in favour? All those... Anyone against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you, Councillor Slade. That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Takes us to agenda item 18, which is the members' question time. There are 7 questions from members today, and I refer to the sheet. And the first question is Councillor Giles Davis.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Could you please provide an update on the recent situation regarding South Wales Fire and Rescue Service and a stripping of responsibilities by the Welsh Government following a damning report, and what implications this has for the 2 Torfaen Labour members of this council who also sit on the Fire Authority? Thank you.
Leader.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Davis. Following the concerns raised in the report, commissioners and a temporary secondee have been appointed by Welsh Government to work on addressing these issues raised. This is not a judgment on any of the members of this council of any party who have sat on the Fire Authority in the past, merely a recognition of the need to address the cultural issues identified in the service. Members of this council of all parties and groups who sit on outside bodies do a difficult and demanding job on top of their other ward and council responsibilities, and I thank them for all they do.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Giles Davis, question 2, please.
Yeah, question 2. Will the leader commit to obligatory extensive training for councillors on the use of social media with an emphasis on the code of conduct and acceptable behaviour towards residents?
Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Davis, for your question. All members receive training, and I know our excellent and hard-working staff in member services will continue to adjust and develop the training we receive to help us fulfil our duties as councillors. We all try our best as councillors to act with consideration towards others, something I hope you'd recognise in me and in how I've tried to lead this council. But please also remember that councillors are human beings with their own battles and burdens. Sometimes social media can bring out the worst in people, and the goading and abuse of councillors I've seen over the years doesn't help anyone or anything.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Elizabeth Haynes, question 3.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Will the Executive Member confirm when there will be a review of the policy relating to non-faith children having the same free access to faith school buses that children of faith do?
Thank you, Councillor Haynes, for the question. The Council Transport policy applies to all eligible learners, not any particular group thereof. The policy complies with the learner travel measure, which is a legal framework that sets out travel and transport provision for learners travelling from home to school in Wales. However, we are aware the learner travel measure is being reviewed by Welsh Government, and it has been indicated that the revised document should be completed shortly. We will naturally, of course, need to ensure that we comply with any changes they introduce to remain compliant with the measure. I believe I wrote to Councillor Haynes in June last year saying this was being reviewed. As soon as that review has taken place and we make the necessary modifications, I will write out to all members so they are aware of that.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Haynes with question 4, please.
Can I just ask, supplementary being that once this is that the reason that I've asked this question is that it's almost a year down the line since originally asking questions via email. Will you put that answer in writing to me, please, so that I can send it on to the relevant residents that have raised it? And does the Executive Member agree that the current policy really needs a review because exclusion based on a lack of faith isn't really acceptable in 2024?
Yes, it is a year. I can't apologise for that because it's out of my hands, but it isn't appropriate. I would have hoped the measure would have been reviewed by now. And as I promised in that letter, I would update her when that review takes place. More than happy to put that in writing for you. I would deal with particular issues. The current measure does actually specifically refer to parental and children's choice, in particular the children's choice under the European Convention, United Nations, Rights of the Child Convention, where it says even if parental and the children's responses are to go to a certain school, if that is outside the nearest school, then they are not entitled to school transport. We will not be able to change that unless the Welsh Government changes that. Since our email exchange in June last year, I have brought this up with, as I promised in the email, with counterparts in the other Welsh local authorities to see what was happening in those areas, and the current Education Secretary was in those meetings, and he advised of the review and that they could take that into consideration. There's a big difference between taking consideration and actually changing the measure. But I will write to you with my answer, Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Can you ask question 4, please, Councillor Haynes?
Will do, thank you. Question 2. The tennis courts in Oldcombe Bran have recently undergone some extensive renovation works, partly funded by Section 106 money from the neighbouring housing development. There was some consultation with residents about the proposals, but there has not been any mention of a pay-per-play fee that has recently been circulating in the community. These courts are within close proximity to areas of deprivation. They've always been free to use and have always been maintained by TCBC. Maintenance costs should actually now go down with it being all new. Does the executive member agree that financial exclusion should be avoided at all costs, and will the executive member commit to Oldcombe Bran Park, tennis courts and Mugger being completely free to use?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Haynes. Firstly, I'd like to thank officers for their work in securing improvements to the tennis courts through accessing the grant funding from the Lawn Tennis Association, LTA, and also getting Section 106 money. I know that works are due to be completed in the spring, which include the line marking and colour painting, and the facility is currently open for the community and is free to use on a turn-up-and-play basis. A condition of the funding from the LTA is that the courts are to be maintained to a high quality for users, so it is necessary to ensure the financial sustainability. Due to the existing financial pressures we have, it is incumbent on the Council to explore all options to meet the costs for the upkeep of the courts, and that does include whether they should be pay charges. But no decision has been made on introducing charging and no announcement made. I've been having conversations with officers for months now, and I've been raising the same points as you have, Councillor Haynes, as you have in your question. The courts have always been free, they're close to areas of deprivation, and also the impact the cost of living is having on any proposal to charge. So those conversations have been ongoing. I've also said that when officers have explored all options and they've got everything together, we need to get your views before any proposals are made and consulted on with the public. I think it's important that we promote physical activity, improve health and well-being of residents through sports and other means. It's also important to ensure good quality, sustainable sports and recreational facilities for both our residents but also people who visit Torvine. But we also need to take into account affordability. So I just suggest that we get together once officers have completed all the explorations and we can look at all possibilities. That's yourself and Councillor Bonero, obviously, as ward councillors.
Can I just come back in on that?
Yes, Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Mandy. I really appreciate that comment, and I'm really pleased to hear that you've got exactly the same concerns. I'd very much welcome both Councillor Bonero and I being involved in this process, and welcome that commitment. Can I also have your answer in writing, please?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Question 5, Councillor David Thomas to the Leader.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Could the Leader explain to Council how he chooses his cabinet and why it's not a cross-party cabinet? I think it would be interesting to know how the Leader decides who is best for these extremely important roles, especially as the cabinet he creates are directly responsible for major decisions that affect the people of Torvine.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Thomas. I select my cabinet to put to Council, and it's important to remember that Council votes on the cabinet each year based on personal attributes and qualities as part of a team. As with other equally important roles on this Council, from scrutiny and regulatory roles to other bodies, many of those roles have been held by councillors from other parties and groups, but the collective responsibility aspect of cabinet means that in councils where only one party is a majority on the council, those roles are usually held by the majority party. I've looked to extend working groups on strategic issues and on task and finish, and I've extended invitations to councillors of all groups to sit on those as recognition of the need for cross-party working. And I and my Labour Cabinet members try to work with all members when issues are impacted in their wards, whatever group they sit on. It should be remembered that in councils, there's a clear distinction between member and officer roles. Chief officer and director roles are appointed based on specific expertise to run departments, a role that's often confused with that of cabinet members, as my role is sometimes confused with that of the chief executive. Teamwork is key, with appropriate challenge, goal setting and strategy, rather than micromanagement on operational matters. Lastly, I always look to a gender balance and a mix of ages and life experiences as part of appointing cabinet, as I believe that diversity contributes to better debate and decisions.
Thank you, Leader.
I've got a supplementary, Madam Presiding Member. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Would the Leader consider in the future choosing a cross-party cabinet so that he might have a greater choice from the 40 members, of some of whom may have greater experience within these cabinet roles?
Obviously, that's a decision ultimately of the electorate in which councillors they appoint and whether they grant a majority to one party or the other. As I've said, I will continue to work with members of all groups and take advantage of their skills and their expertise and their knowledge of their wards especially and of other issues, and to try and take forward issues, including with yourself as someone who's had a lot to offer on the working group on recycling and raising the rate, for example.
Thank you, Leader. Question 7 is Councillor Carl Gordon.
Madam Presiding Member, I've got a second question. Sorry
Yes.
to keep boring everyone with my
Apologies, the
droning
supplementary
tone.
put me off. I crossed it
That's
out.
okay. That's okay. I'll try and keep it quick. With Torvine pushing the Razor rate and spending money on pushing this campaign, what plans does this council have to start replacing the old public waste bins for modern recycling bins to further encourage the general public walking by to recycle more? Costs shouldn't come into this if, of course, this council is serious about raising the rate and this council's claim on its declaration for declaring a climate change emergency.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Thomas. Firstly, can I say that we are committed and we are serious about raising the rate and our declaration of the climate change emergency. I know we value your involvement and input on the strategic partnership board along with other councillors, and your suggestion to upgrade the litter bins is something that does have merit and something we can certainly look at. As you know from your involvement with the SPB, we're working closely with local partnerships, Welsh Government and RAP, as circular economy and resource efficiency experts to maximise the amount of waste which is recycled. Officers are working on developing distinct work streams which maximise the uptake of household recycling. The intention is to minimise the amount of residual waste collected from households, which currently constitutes 37% of the total municipal waste stream. The percentage of municipal waste which is collected by street scene, including the waste from public litter bins, equates to just 3%. I know you said that money shouldn't come into it, but unfortunately it does. It's got an impact on everything we do at the council, all services, organisations, all businesses. We've just heard how challenging the budget is and difficult choices that we've got to make and has been made. And when you look at the costs of current litter bins, which are £325 each, we've got 600 litter bins in the borough. The cost of the new recycling bins range from anywhere from £500 to £1,000 each, so it's going to be a lot of money to replace them. There's also a great deal of things we need to take into consideration. There's the issues of contamination, which does occur in these bins, the impact that has on the contents, the resources that would be needed to empty them in separate streams, amongst other things. Advice and experience provided by local partnerships and RAP would suggest that considerable amounts of recyclables could be extracted from the existing household residual waste stream, and this has been prioritised, and this is where the efforts are being targeted at the moment to obtain the greatest benefit towards achieving our recycling targets. However, we do want to strive to increase our recycling rates further, as do all councils in Wales. We want to reduce the amount of waste which is sent to landfills, so I think it's important, and we do need to consider all ways and initiatives going forward, and to consider how our waste from litter bins is also being treated is something we definitely need to look at. So I think it's definitely worth a further conversation which we can have, and I think we could take it forward to the SBB for a future agenda item and conversation. Maybe we could put it on a future work stream then to have a good deep dive on it. But at the moment, the emphasis and the priority is reducing the municipal from households to reach our target.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Thomas, you have a supplement?
Yeah, I've gone. Sorry about that. It's only a quick one. When the public bins are emptied, are they being checked for recycling items?
Not at the moment, no. and that's where the issues come in with the effort and sorting space and resources.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Gordon, question 7.
Oh, sorry, he's coming up as Councillor Cowles, but he sat next to me anyway, so I logged in so long ago, it's probably expired by now. So, the final question. Could the Executive Member for Adult Services and Housing provide an update on the current figures for unallocated domiciliary care homes? Thank you. Care hours.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Gordon. Sorry. This is probably an opportune time to provide an update, as we're currently in the winter period, where we typically face greater pressures than at any other point in the year. Domiciliary care, as many of you know, is a vital service which enables individuals with care needs to remain independently and safely in their own homes. Over the years, we've seen an increased demand and emphasis on domiciliary care, as more and more residents tell us they wish to remain in their own homes for as long as possible. This increased demand has presented significant challenges around availability of care packages, and in recent years, our figures of unallocated hours of care have often hovered around the 700 mark. This has reached a peak of around 1,000 hours in 2022, and it hovered around the 900 mark during COVID. Today, however, I'm pleased to update to members that as of Q2 this year, the figure stood at 31.5 hours. This is the lowest I've seen for as long as I can remember. Now, there are many factors which affect this figure, but we're cautiously optimistic that our year-on-year prioritisation of resources for domiciliary care is having a positive impact. Last year, for example, we were pleased to welcome 4 new companies to the domiciliary care market here in Torfaen, and going forward, we'll continue to prioritise domiciliary care to reflect the sort of care that our residents are telling us that they want, and strive to keep this figure for unallocated hours as low as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daniels. Supplementary, Councillor Gordon? No, you're fine. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 19 then. Thank members for their questions. This is the Cabinet decisions of the 16th of January 2024. Cabinet decisions start on page 519 and are for the Council to note. There were no challenges to any of the decisions. Any comments or questions for the Cabinet? Can I ask members whether they agree with the recommendations to note the Cabinet minutes then, please? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. They noted. The date and time of the next meeting, for your information, members, the next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 23rd of April, 2024, and at 10 o'clock. Thank you, members, for attending this meeting. I now close the meeting.